holding the line for the conservative movement. This is Stacy on the Right on SiriusXM Patriot 125.
Welcome back, friends. Thank you for your time this evening, and let's tuck into our first guest, Ethan Brown, prolific writer and commentator on climate issues. He's the founder and host of The Sweaty Penguin. He's a Young Voices contributor. Ethan, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me back, Stacy. Great to chat with you.
Yes, absolutely. So let's talk about fusion breakthroughs. First off, what are fusion breakthroughs or breakthroughs in the fusion industry? Because I want to make sure our listeners are completely aware of what we're going to delve into here tonight.
Sure. So nuclear fusion is a potential energy source, emphasis on potential. Basically, we take hydrogen atoms and we put them into some reactor like 7 times hotter than the sun, and if you fuse 2 hydrogen atoms together, it creates a helium atom and it creates energy. So there's a lot of energy that goes into getting a reactor that hot, but if you can create a reaction where the energy that you get is more than the energy that you put in, then in theory you have a new source of energy.
Okay, so this is something that some people are pretty excited about, and they feel like it could be a good supplement to our current energy paradigm. What's wrong with that excitement?
There's nothing wrong with excitement from a scientific perspective. The latest news in December, there was the first big nuclear fusion breakthrough. It was the first time one of these reactions occurred where the energy output was greater than the energy input. In August, the experiment was replicated. Each of these, it lasted for about 5 seconds where we got this energy output. And it is exciting. It's exciting just that science can advance like that. But we're way off from this being something that we can actually implement into our energy grid and power our homes and our lives with. And I think I wanted to express that there are a lot of up-and-coming energy sources that are a lot further along than this, and hopefully we can be as excited or even more excited about those than nuclear fusion, since it would be really cool. It's just so far away.
Okay, so what are some of these further along the development pipeline energy sources that we should be excited about?
There's so many. It's all the ones we have heard of. You can talk about solar, wind, nuclear fission, which is the actual nuclear reactors with uranium. There's hydrogen, there's geothermal, and all of these have their own share of issues. I'm certainly not going to deny that, but I think that these sources are further along in their development. At this point, many of them are even some of the cheapest and most cost-competitive energy sources on the market. And even like fossil fuels, there's the climate issues we can talk about, but those are much further along as well. So we have all these options at our disposal, and ultimately we don't need one perfect energy source. We need a grid that encompasses a lot of different energy sources that can offer a lot of different things and hopefully create energy as affordably and as cleanly as possible.
Sure. So there's a big story here in Missouri where you have the Missouri Public Service Commission, and what they did is they approved, and it's been a 10-year process, so this has been long coming, but it's not been a 10-year process for the landowners who are going to have to open up their private farmland for this. It's a grain belt express power line, and it's going to run through the state of Missouri, and it's going to crisscross through privately owned farmland. And so they have a 4-1 vote ending the 10-year process. The commission approves this amendment to the original request. And what they're doing is this Invenergy transmission project doesn't give basically any notice to landowners. The landowners get 24 hours, and then the people come in with the power lines and they put them through. The power lines will carry energy that has been generated by green energy sources. So that's why they're not using current power lines that are already standing. It's new infrastructure that they need. It's going to make 5,757 construction jobs. They claim it'll be 586 million in worker earnings during the 3-year construction period. But it's still, it's really a hard hit on the farmers because they haven't gotten a chance to really say yes or no. They're not being asked to do this. They're being told, you're going to do this. We're putting this on your land. And if it adversely impacts the value of their land, they're not going to be compensated for that. And so we have a media release from the Sierra Club, and they call it a huge win for clean energy in Missouri and neighboring states. But I thought, just from my observations, that people who support clean energy also support property rights and individuals being able to choose to be a part of that paradigm. This sounds like the same way it was when the railroad came through. And, think of all the other industrialized innovations that have happened in our country. They usually come through by eminent domain, and people's rights and their lives are trampled on. But this is 2023. It seems like we could find a better way to get that done. If clean energy really is the future, why are they using the old methods to get it through the state of Missouri in this example?
Well, I'm with you there. I haven't seen this specific story, but I very strongly value property rights. I would not want to see someone subjugated to something that they didn't have approval over on their own land, or that would hurt their land. There are ways in which this can be done to actually benefit farmers, though, which excite me. I know that I've seen a lot of stories out in western Texas where farmers will set up wind turbines or solar panels on the land that they have their cattle graze on. There's so much land there that's not really being used for much else besides grazing. I've seen the cows actually really enjoy going up to the panels and the turbines, and it brings in more revenue for the farmers who can get money off that energy, and it can also be just another use of that land. We don't have to waste new land doing this. So there are stories like that I see that really excite me. This story sounds like the opposite, where people aren't getting to choose what they do with their land and aren't getting the economic benefit from it. And that's really disappointing, because I would hope that we could do a better job and ensure that people are, if they volunteer to use their land, that they're actually making some money off it.
Yeah, or that they can opt out. And I mean, through a 10-year process, it seems like they would have found landowners who wanted it to come through, that they could compensate. That
you
there
would
would be
think,
some.
Wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm bringing that up to the forefront because this is not, the 1850s or 1927 or something like that, where there weren't a lot of innovations and there wasn't a huge political movement to kind of say, hey, let's respect individuals' rights. There was a lot of eminent domain taking back then, and there wasn't a lot of, kind of media coverage about it. You just had your land taken by eminent domain. You might get compensated, you might not. Now it's 2023. We do have a lot of social media coverage. We do have a lot of people who, kind of call themselves activists, and they say a lot of really flowery, wonderful things. And I would love to see that language actually be demonstrated in something like, helping these farmers to feel like they're not being railroaded. Sierra Club has also stated that reduced air pollution from burning fossil fuels will save Missourians $7.6 billion in healthcare bills. Some of these numbers, I have to tell you, Ethan, I don't really trust these numbers. Like, I'm not sure how they're calculating that. They say that the organization says Grain Belt estimates Kansans will save $1.22 billion. Illinoisans will save $4.3 billion on utility bills over the next 15 years. How do they know that? Right now, I'm paying 3 times as much as I paid during the last presidential administration for my gas bill in the winter, and my electric bill was just atrocious this summer, and I didn't even go ham. I didn't even put it into the low 60s like I sometimes am wont to do, because I love cold air. So, I mean, how do they know that?
I'm not personally an expert on how the health numbers are calculated. I have interviewed scientists who do that work, and I'm sure I could ask them for you if you'd like. And as for electric bills, I think that year to year, even over a small number of years, it's maybe not as relevant to what sources it's coming from, just because all these projects take a lot of time to add to the grid, but ultimately, whether new energy is coming from clean energy, whether it's coming from fossil fuels, what have you, it should make our energy cheaper. If it's not, that sounds strange. So I think that, ideally we want to make energy cheaper. Over the last decade, from 2010 to 2019, cost of solar decreased by 85%, wind by 55%, lithium-ion batteries by 85%. These kinds of things really excite me because, again, I would not be all that excited about clean energy if it was more expensive than the alternatives. The fact that it's becoming competitive and often even cheaper, that gets me excited and optimistic that it could be a benefit. And to the eminent domain thing, it's happening in other energy sources too. Very often it's natural gas pipelines that are causing governments to take people's land. I'm not for that in any case, be it solar, wind, that. I think that people should be able to not just choose what they do with their land, but actually reap the benefits if they do choose to have an activity be on their land.
Well, with the natural gas pipelines, they don't actually take the land from the people who own it. They run the gas pipeline through the land underneath the soil. So there is an initial, installation type of a situation where the land has to be dug down and they have to put the pipe in. But when they put the land back, it's indistinguishable. And then they have signs that they put up to indicate that there's an easement there. But the rest of the land around it can be used. You can put a road up right next to where the natural gas pipeline is. I know this because my husband and I viewed a 150-acre parcel that had a natural gas pipeline running through it, and the realtor who showed us the property showed us all of the different, not just the easements, but the different things you could do with the land just adjacent to the natural gas pipeline, where the easements were, how they intersected with all of the other adjoining properties, and where you could actually run a road right next to it without, any kind of impedance on the easement, and that the easement didn't actually prevent you from fully utilizing the 150 acres. That's not the same with wind turbines. And so I do have a question for you about that, because you were talking about being excited about wind energy. What about the disposal of the wind turbines? Because they're made of it's a type of technology that creates the wind turbine itself. You can't actually recycle that, and there is no other use for the actual wind turbine itself, like the actual rotors. There's no use for it afterwards. So right now, overseas, they're just dumping those on the continent of Africa on, poor nations, that people who live in huts and burn wood for fuel have these huge, like, graveyards of wind turbines that are broken or have something wrong with them, and they just dump them there. Here in the United States, we're not adjacent to the continent of Africa. Are we planning on dumping those in the Northern Triangle countries, or what are we going to do with all of the expended or used wind turbines that can't be recycled and they can't really be buried? There's nothing we can do with them.
Well, I know people are working on developing the ability to recycle them. I think that often we say something isn't recyclable and then someone figures it out. So I guess I'm optimistic in that regard. But you're right, it is an issue right now. It's something we have to figure out, and the current methods are not a long-term solution. But again, this is where technology needs to develop, and hopefully we can find a solution, especially as more and more, especially as wind continues to grow, so that as turbines reach the end of their life, we can handle it.
So I guess the other part about it is, for you have a lot of excitement about new green energy options in the paradigm, but we're seeing the Biden administration use the regulatory state to kind of move things along. So Americans really like their gas-powered cars, especially those of us who live in harsh winter climates where we have snow. The gas-powered cars have a reduction in the fuel efficiency, but it's not enough to prevent the car from being used during, below zero weather, where a EV doesn't actually move during below zero weather. You can't actually use a truck or a car during these really, really cold temperatures or ice storms. Your EV is basically like a paperweight. It's like a toy. And so for Americans who are in that situation, or they have to do heavy hauling, or they use their truck for, heavy duty work that's associated with their business, they're not ready to jump to the EV paradigm. But the Biden administration is forcing these standards where by 2035, they expect 70 or 79% of the vehicles on the road to be EVs. And the current they did a study over at the Heritage Foundation and found that that's impossible. You will only have increased the number of EVs on the road at that time, with the average age of an American car being 12 years right now. You're only going to increase that by 7 to 14%. So I'm wondering, and you're excited about the green energy paradigm, but what about for people who aren't excited about it? Do you agree with the current Democrat orthodoxy that says, whether I'm excited or not, I'm going to be driving an EV by 2035, even if I don't want to?
I think I tend to lean toward giving people freedom to do what they want while taking into account whatever the costs of certain actions may be. So in terms of that specific policy, I know the one that you're referencing, and that is, at least from a civic perspective, there weren't really other options to accomplish the goal that they wanted from just the executive branch, because really they were looking at the Clean Air Act and saying the Clean Air Act demands that we reduce certain pollutants by the degree to which is feasible, and so they did their research and put together this tailpipe regulation. But it's not the most efficient way to do this. It's certainly not the most effective or free way to do this. I'd prefer when Congress can come together and use bipartisan majorities to figure out much more clever tactics that can ensure that people can choose what they want to do, but that they will, if, for example, a gasoline-powered car is adding greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, that cost is accounted for. If electric vehicles have issues related to mineral mining or what have you, those costs are accounted for, and the benefits are also accounted for. We can do these cost-benefit calculations and create policy that can hopefully better reflect those costs in a free market. So, yeah, there's a number of different ways to regulate it, and I certainly EVs are far from perfect, and it really just depends on where you live and the availability of chargers and all these different questions. But yeah, it's a complicated issue, as I'm sure you know.
It is. It's a complicated issue, and I think the complications are that we're dealing with human beings. And so if we were just playing a Sims game, I can implement anything I want in my Sims community, and I can get it done. And, any Sims that don't comply, I can delete or move to another community. I mean, that's the whole idea behind it, is you get to control an entire ecosystem and see what your decisions do to these fake people. But in real life, people don't always agree or want to participate. And I think the part that is kind of the reason I can't get excited about it, quite frankly, Ethan, is because you mentioned the mining issues. Knowing that kids in third world hellholes are using their bare hands to mine the rare earth minerals that go into making an EV kind of make that car unattractive to me. And I understand that, there's atrocities going on across the globe, but why do I have to help out? Why do I have to contribute to it? Why do I have to be a part of it by having an EV? And so I think there's a little bit of like an ignorance surrounding why some people would just say it's not the right time for this right now. We need to make some changes in the way the EVs are made, and the technology still isn't where it needs to be. And certainly the infrastructure, if you saw Jennifer Granholm's disastrous trip across the country with her 60 some odd electric vehicles, and they were commandeering charging stations and keeping mothers with infants away from the charging stations in 103-degree Georgia heat. I mean, that was an embarrassment for her. She even got called in front of Congress about it. We certainly don't have the infrastructure needed to move forward with the Biden green energy paradigm. And I think it's up to people like yourself, because you are an expert in this area and your voice is seen as someone who, when you say, I'm excited about this or that, people take note. I think people like me are relying on experts like yourself to stand up and say, let's pump the brakes. Let's take the concerns of Americans into consideration, and let's not force people to do things that they don't want to do because of our desire to have more green energy. If you take your time, you could get there, or you could find enormous backlash from Americans who simply will never be able to own an EV because they live in North Dakota and, Michigan and places like that where it's just not feasible, and they don't understand why they're being forced into this in the first place. Ford lost $1 billion on EVs last year. $1 billion.
Yeah, to your point about sort of expressing concerns and pumping the brakes, that's really what a lot of my goal has been with a lot of the journalism I've done on this. I did an episode on electric vehicles this year on the Sweaty Penguin. We did one on solar power. We've done on nuclear energy. And in these episodes, we really have framed them as, here are the potential benefits. Here are all of the concerns with electric vehicles. We actually went mineral by mineral and talked about each, where it's being mined, what the issues are, and then how we can improve on these concerns. I think that's important too. There are paths forward to actually mitigate some of these challenges with these various technologies. With EVs as an example, we can be mining these things sustainably. We can be mining them ethically. We can do it in America. And if we can actually implement some of the changes that can improve on these technologies, that's where I'm excited, because I think that not that these things are perfect right now, they're far from it, but none of these things are perfect. Fossil fuels aren't perfect either. Gasoline-powered cars aren't perfect either. And if we can create, if we can improve everything, if we can improve the fossil fuel-powered stuff, but also if we can improve the clean energy stuff to make it as awesome as possible, and then let people choose and see which ones outcompete the other ones, that's why I'm excited. It's not that I think everything is perfect now. It's that I see a lot of progress and I see a lot of potential.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that, because we really need voices from all sides of the spectrum, all parts of the spectrum for energy to speak up and to increase the there's like a give and a take. We must have give and take on this, on our energy selections, so that different parts of the country can live in the ways that best suit them, because we do have such an enormous country and so many different needs, and so many different, like Californians can live one way that Missourians can't. We can't do it when we get 4 feet of snow. We don't get that every year, but we do get it. And we have ice storms, and there's all kind. We're on a fault line. We occasionally have earthquakes. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that we do, but it's not the same as in California, where they have wildfires, but they also have persistently warm weather and, no snow. So it's like, we got to figure out a way to live together and not force each other to do things that don't really work for our part of the country. Really appreciate you coming back on to talk about this. I know the Sweaty Penguin is super popular, and we're so glad you're discussing these things and unpacking them issue by issue. Tell everyone where to find it. I know Sweaty Penguin is wherever podcasts are found, and thesweatypenguin.com. Tell everyone how else to find you.
Yep, you kind of covered it. Thesweatypenguin.com, wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, all that good stuff. Super great to talk to you again, and I hope to do it again soon.
All right. We love having you. Stop by, Ethan. Thank you for your time tonight. Have a wonderful evening. He's also, in addition to being a prolific writer and commentator, Sweaty Penguin host, he is also a Young Voices contributor. You can find out more about Young Voices at young-voices.com. We'll be right back with more.